Consent. What's love got to do with it? Consent should be a straightforward, easy to understand concept. But unfortunately, there's a lot of confusion about what consent entails. I'm giving you all consent to watch this video. But you already knew that, didn't you? Do I have your consent to tell you something that you might not want to hear about rape? Well, if not, trigger warning, trigger warning, stop watching this video immediately. Given that the definition of rape normally rests on a definition of consent, then that makes it very important to be clear about what we mean by consent. To give consent simply means to agree to something, or to give permission for something. Contrary to what I hear feminists like Jacqueline Friedman saying when they talk about enthusiastic or passionate consent. Consent really has nothing to do with any particular feeling, or attitude, or emotion. Consent is not passion. Consent is not desire. Consent is not absolute certainty. Consent is not absolute freedom. Consent is just consent. It turns out that some people have consent to give consent, and others don't have consent to give consent. This is for reasons that I don't need to get into for the moment. Instead, I want to challenge this idea that to truly give consent to something means that you must want it, or that wanting it or not wanting it is what is important. This idea will inevitably lead to confusion, because we are changing the topic to desire, and desire is much murkier than it appears to be at first glance. People often appeal to this idea of there being something that you really want, as if there's such a thing as what someone really wants. I would argue that, no, there really isn't. So I think we need a better way to think about consent that keeps its distance from desire. If you look deep into the human psyche, you won't find any clear desires, beliefs, or intentions. But yet, when we normally talk about people, we speak as though their behavior is best explained as a result of a belief, a desire, or an intention. This simple framework is referred to as folk psychology, and although it is adequate for everyday human interaction, it's not adequate for the current discussion. Suppose I were to ask you, do you want to eat this bag of potato chips or not? And you say, no thanks. But I know how much you love potato chips. And maybe it's true. Maybe you do want the potato chips on some level. But you have other desires too. Maybe you don't want me to think that you're a pig. Maybe you are concerned about your health. Maybe you want to save room for something else. Maybe you don't want to feel obliged to reciprocate the favor. Maybe if I ask you again, you'll say yes. Or maybe you'll say no for now, but then you'll ask me for some chips 5 minutes from now. Or maybe you'll beg me for chips 10 minutes from now. Many of our decisions are like this. They're difficult and subject to revision. And they only become more difficult the more we stop and think about them. We have to weigh different goals and impulses against each other, both long-term and short-term. If our desires were uncomplicated, if they came from nowhere, then it might make sense to say that someone could have a purely free and unpredictable desire, perhaps. And if we had no consequences to consider, then it might be possible to make decisions with absolute certainty, confidence, passion, and conviction, without ever changing our mind. It seems almost paradoxical, but the more difficult our decisions are, the more tension, stress, and doubt we feel, and the more those decisions could be said to be free. Furthermore, when our decisions seem easy, unconscious, predictable, as a matter of habit, that is when we are less free. Freedom is never absolute. we are never truly free in any absolute sense. So the more sure you are about your decisions, then the less freedom you have to choose. And the more freedom you have to choose, the more conflicted and uncertain you will feel about your decisions. But don't we also often say that only free choices are real choices? And don't we also often say that passion and conviction are signs of real agency? Don't we feel more sure about what someone wants if they seem to be sure about what they want? Expecting total certainty and total freedom simultaneously. Now that's just a tad unrealistic. My point is, consent when you are not 100% certain, that's still consent. It has to be. And consent when you're not 100% free, that's still consent. It has to be. If not, then true consent could never exist. That is why I say that consent is not really a measure of freedom, nor is it a measure of certainty or passion. Because when someone is passionate, it just means that they're really sure about what they want. You can also be a slave to passion. Passion is good, but it's also bad. Someone could easily consent to something that they don't want on some level, because human desires are pluralistic, dynamic, and complicated. That doesn't make consent any less valid or compromised in any way, though. Your ability to consent means that you don't need to have any particular reason or any particular feeling. You can base your decision on a coin toss if you want to. You can elect someone else to decide on your behalf. And it really is black and white. When it comes to consent, there are no shades of gray. You can't have a weak consent or a strong consent. However, you can have a weak signal or a strong signal. The only real gray area is with respect to interpretation and sending a clear signal to other people. But you don't need enthusiasm to send a clear signal. You shouldn't feel pressure to communicate enthusiasm when you don't really feel enthusiasm. And you shouldn't feel any guilt or pressure to feel enthusiastic when you just don't really care that much. Enthusiastic consent is bullshit.